Hey guys, this is predict the probability of individual dominant and recessive alleles to be transmitted from each parent to offspring during sexual reproduction and represent the phenotypic and genotypic patterns using ratios. Ooh, that's a whole lot of words. Basically, we're going to predict what offspring are going to be using Punnett Squares and determine what traits are dominant and recessive. So we got to review some vocabulary words first and learn some new ones, and then we'll learn how to solve Punnett Squares. Your first term is Mendel, and Mendel is talking about this gentleman right here. This is Gregor Mendel, and he discovered principles of heredity with pea plants. He basically figured out that certain traits are dominant and certain are recessive. So that's on Gregor Mendel. Okay, so next we have gametes, which is a review. You know this from when we talked about body systems. But we have sex cells. The egg is in female and sperm is in males. Our next term is gene. You should know this one from last week. Instructions for inherited traits. Then we have alleles. They're the alternate form of a gene. And I'm going to talk about that here in a second. Then we have heredity. Alleles, let me go back to alleles, are different versions of the genes. And I'm going to talk about that when I talk about this picture here in a second. Heredity is the passing of traits to offspring. So this is an example of a gene, and on this gene for eye color, it will code either brown or blue, and that is the allele, the brown and the blue part. So it's a different version of the same gene. Eye color is the gene, and brown or blue are the alleles. So same thing down here for hair color. We have the gene for hair color, and then the allele is going to be what color hair. Is it red, brown, blue? Not blue, that would be eye color. Red, brown, blonde, black for hair color. The colors would be alleles. The gene that's telling you the trait is going to be hair color. Our next is pedigree, and pedigree is basically a diagram that shows the occurrence of genetic traits in several generations of a family. So you have this chart over here to the right. The XY is a male, and those are going to be the squares, and the XX is the female. And so basically it's a family tree, or a chart that shows the family tree of inherited traits. So if you were tracking a trait, you would see if it was on the male side or the female side, or the mom or dad, and who's got what trait. Alright, a genome is basically, this genome definition is a little messed up from your sheet also, possibly. But it's a complete set of DNA, including all of its genes. In humans, it would be all the genes on our 46 chromosomes, So, like, every single gene that we have is discussed as a genome, okay? It's just been in the last, 20 or 30 years that they even discovered all and were able to name all of the genes on our chromosomes. So it's relatively new science. Punnett Squares are graphic organizers to show the chance or probability of traits appearing in the offspring. So it looks like this box over here, and I'm going to show you how to solve a Punnett Square at the end, but the stuff inside is the probability or the chance of something occurring. Alright, here we go. Genotype is the letter combination or the entire genetic makeup. It's 2 letters, always 2 letters. You get a letter from your mom and a letter from your dad. and the letter combination, like capital B, capital B, capital B, lowercase b, or lowercase b, are significant, and it tells you something, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But you get a letter from each parent, and this tells you what the gene is, and how it's going to appear. Phenotype is a letter combination that tells you what you will see. It shows up in your physical appearance, and physical appearance means like, if you think about a photograph or a picture, what you see on the picture, right? It's the physical appearance. How you physically appear or physically look is based on the phenotype. Dominant traits show up in the first generation and are stronger. And the dominant and recessive trait sort of goes back to Mendel and his pea plants. And the generation stuff is what he figured out. And we'll talk about that when we talk about solving for Punnett squares. When you are writing about dominant traits, you write with the capital letter. So if you were saying that brown eyes was dominant, and you would write 2 capital B's, that would be showing that it's the dominant trait. Recessive trait shows up in the second generation, and it's the weaker trait. It's written with lowercase letters, and we're going to talk about the 3 different types in these pictures below. So the capital B, that's the genotype. That's the example of genotype. That's how you would write a genotype, with capital letters, or well, with 2 letters. The casing of the letter depends on the Punnett square. The color, the purple flower, is the phenotype, because it is the physical, what you see, the physical characteristic of the flower. So genotype is a letter, phenotype is what you see. Uh-oh, I went too far. Hang on. Let me catch back up. Okay, so then on this next one, we have lowercase b. So that means this is recessive, because I told you right here that lowercase is written in recessive, and that would be the genotype. And it's telling us the phenotype. Well, we can see the phenotype, and in this case, it's white. This one right here is its own special case that we'll talk about in a second, where it's got both a capital and a lowercase letter, but the letters are the genotype. Alright, so heterozygous and homozygous are what we need to talk about now, and that'll explain how you know which letter type to use. Heterozygous is when you have heterozygous genes, you have 2 different, oh, I didn't mean to write different twice. That was a mistake. You have 2 different letters, not 2 different difference. Let me erase that and try again. 2 different. Oh, hold up. What did I do? Alright, I think I fixed it, but we'll see. So you have 2 different letters. I don't know what's going to happen when I push this button. Meaning, oh, see, look, I did not fix it. Let me try again. 2 different letters. It's a little sloppy now, sorry. Capital B, lowercase b is what I mean by 2 different letters. I mean 2 different letter cases, not like an A and a B. The letters themselves are the same, but the size of the letters, capital or lowercase, are different. Sometimes this is called a hybrid. If we have any Harry Potter fans, you might think about a purebred as being both from the wizarding family, and so a hybrid would be somebody who's not, where one parent is a wizard and one isn't. Let's keep going here. Homozygous genes are 2 of the same alleles. Oh, maybe that was supposed to be alleles. That makes much better sense. I don't know what I did earlier today, guys. Sorry about that. Alright, so 2 of the same alleles, and alleles is what I'm talking about, is the letters. So you have capital B, or lowercase b again. And this would be the purebred. So two wizards of a wizarding family, a male and a female that got married, would have purebred children because they're both from the wizarding family. So purebred is homozygous because it's both the same cased letters. You can remember it's used to describe genotypes. The letters are capital B is homozygous, dominant, because we know dominant is capital letters, and we know homozygous back from when we did our word study that homo is same. We would write it as HOD if we wanted to abbreviate, but that means homozygous dominant. On the far right, we have homozygous recessive because the letters are lowercase, and we know from the slide previous that lowercase letters are recessive. And back when we talked about words, we know that hetero is different. So, and we said homo was same already, and that heterozygous letters means different cased letters. So, that tells the genotype. These letters tell the genotype. And so if you were talking about a genotype, we would say that it is homozygous dominant if it's capital B. We would say it's heterozygous if it's a capital and a lowercase. And we would say it's homozygous recessive if it's two lowercase letters. And because of those terms, that would tell you what you would physically see. So you need to learn these terms. You need to learn that homozygous dominant is the stronger trait and that homozygous recessive is the weaker trait that shows up only with two lowercase letters. And heterozygous is going to show up as a dominant trait, but it means that they can pass this recessive gene on. So it matters for this one here is what plays a big role in second generation stuff. Traits that are passed on. Alright, two more terms. You have sex chromosomes. The mother can only give one X chromosome, and the father gives either an X or a Y. So it's really your dad that determines if you're going to be a girl or a boy. Because when you have your 23 haploid cell chromosomes and your 4 daughter cells at the end, that the mom part, or the egg, only has an X. And then the sperm brings either an X or a Y, and that's what determines the sex, because if two X's are there at the end, then you have a girl, and if you have a Y that comes with the sperm, then you have a boy. So that's what determines your gender. XX is female, XY is male. And then we have things called sex-linked traits that are determined, they're on the chromosomes that determine sex. Not just, sex is not the only thing that is determined on those chromosomes. You have other things. So these are traits that are carried on the X or the Y chromosome. And for example, color blindness. Color blindness is carried on the X chromosome. And so if you have one X and you have this gene here, and it's a recessive gene for colorblind, and it means you are colorblind, and then, or you would be if two lowercase, I'm going to say lowercase b in this case would be colorblind. And if you had two of those, that means you'd be colorblind. So in this instance, this X has that gene. Well, then when the sperm fertilizes the egg and brings the dad's X to the situation, he does not have the recessive trait for colorblindness, and then that means that this offspring is going to be a girl, And she's not going to be colorblind because this is the dominant trait. She'll carry the colorblindness gene, but she won't be colorblind. Well, then on the opposite spectrum of that is if we have the mom has that recessive trait for colorblindness. And then the dad doesn't have it, but it's a boy that is, or Y comes to the picture, and you get a little boy. The little boy is gonna have it because this is a Y. There's no X dominant trait to carry it out. There's only one, and that one is recessive. So whereas this one cancels out this one, there's nothing here to cancel this one out. So then that means this one's gonna be colorblind. Alright, you don't have to write all those scribbles, but I just wanted to explain that to you. So sex-linked traits are tricky because it depends on if you're a girl or a boy, whether you have these traits usually because of where they're carried and on which genes. We're going to talk about Punnett Squares real fast, and then we'll be done this video, and I'll teach you how to do Punnett Squares in class for real. But a Punnett Square is basically just a square, and at the top of the Punnett Square, you're going to write the genotype for, say we're going to do eye color. This is, oops, having technical difficulties on my end, guys. Eye color, except that looks like an X. So let's try again. Eye color. And this right here, I want you to label these parts on your paper as well. This is the genotype. And it's also heterozygous, which the abbreviation we're going to use is HE. And we're going to say that this is the mom. So the mom has brought this genotype for eye color, big B, lowercase b. And in the world of eye color, big B is brown, is dominant. Is brown. And lowercase b will be blue. Alright, and so then in the dad world over here, he's going to send a big B and a lowercase b also. Which, again, this is the genotype. And if you were going to say it, you would say that it's heterozygous because it's two different cased letters. Remember, hetero is different. And then to solve this, what happens is sort of like a quadrant in math. This would be 1, 2, 3, 4. You're going to bring the big B down and this big B over. And so you would get capital B, capital B. In the next quadrant, you're going to bring this big B over and this little b down. And so you're going to get a big B, lowercase b. And then in this quadrant down here, that's going to come down, that's going to come over. You always write the big B or the big, or I guess the word would be capital. The capital letter first and then the lowercase letter. And then in the fourth quadrant, you bring this down, you bring this one over. So you have two lowercase b's here. So if we were talking about the probability or the chance or the ratio of this, we would say that it is 25% homozygous dominant. Now I get that because there's capital B here. And if you think of this as a dollar bill, this square, the Punnett Square, is a dollar bill. Each box that's been divided up is a quarter. And each quarter is a percentage, right? So capital B is 25%. We know that 2 capital letters means it's dominant, and we know that if it's the 2 of the same case letters, it's homozygous. This box, and this box do not have capital B, capital B. They may have capital B's in them, but they're not capital B, capital B. So they don't count for the percentage. And then if you want to look at our next box, it's hard for me to find colors I've not used. We are going to look at these two. These are both the same cased letters, capital B, lowercase b. So we would write capital B, lowercase b. There's 2 boxes of them, so 25 plus 25 equals 50%. And we're calling these heterozygous because they're different cased letters. Hetero is different. And then in our final box down below, in the bottom right-hand corner, we have lowercase b, and so those are also homozygous, right? Because they're the same cased letters. But remember, lowercase letters are recessive, so this one would be HOR, and it's only 1 box, so it would be 25%. So that would be our percents. If we want to talk about a ratio, we would write it pretty much the same. It would be 1 to 2 to 1. 1 heterozygous dominant, 1 homozygous dominant, 2 heterozygous, 1 homozygous recessive. Okay? We will talk about this more in class.